supposed to wrap it 3 times? Yeah, no, that was the preliminary wrap. Okay. All right. It is July 11th, 2019, and I'd like to call the meeting of the Board of Regents to order. Our first item is approval of the June minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the June minutes. Is there any discussion of those minutes? Okay, hearing or seeing none. All those in favor of approving the June minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say no. All right, the motion is approved. All right. It is now my great pleasure to welcome President Gable, who I believe is in the 11th day of her presidency. I know we're all very eager and looking forward to working with President Gable. And President Gable, we appreciate your diligence and your hard work this spring in learning about the university during your transition, as well as your very obvious enthusiasm and energy. This university is already a great place, but we know that with your leadership, we're going to accomplish even more to advance our teaching and our research and our outreach mission. So a very warm welcome to President Gable, and please proceed with your report.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Powell, members of the board. I'm very honored to be with all of you today. I'm also extremely honored and humbled to be only the 17th person to hold the position of president of the University of Minnesota in our nearly 170-year history, and to have this opportunity to serve our students, faculty, and staff, and all of those who call the U home, including our broad community of alumni, friends, and supporters around the state and around the world. I would like to express my sincere thanks to our U community for the many insightful conversations we've shared during the transition and for the warm Minnesota welcome you've extended to me. Those discussions have included, of course, the Board of Regents, my direct reports and senior leaders, our system chancellors, our deans, members of my office team, U faculty and staff across the system, and our student leadership. They've included government officials from the governor to the LG, to members of Congress, the state legislature, and local government representatives, including quick meetings with our mayors of Minneapolis and St. Paul, as well as industry and community leaders across greater Minnesota. And they've included the U's philanthropic community, members of the foundation board, and the Amazing Driven campaign, as well as dozens of our leading and generous benefactors. And I want to say particularly that most of these discussions were on weekends or in the evenings because I was still serving as the University of South Carolina's provost during this period. So I'm especially grateful for everyone's time and willingness to share with me. But to a person, those I've spoken to conveyed their passion and love for this university, what the U has meant to them and often to generations of their families, and how much pride they have in our system, our outreach and discovery, and our impact across the entire state and what that represents. And it was incredibly inspiring. Last week, on July 1st, I concluded my transition and officially began as president. And this moment in our history also comes at a very interesting time in higher education. Across our nation, there is palpable energy around how we best serve our students and communities, how we channel our curiosity and scholarship into meaningful inquiry and useful solutions. And underlying these considerations is intense pressure around cost and relevancy, leading some states and institutions to respond with deep funding cuts and the elimination of programs, sometimes with a focus on revenue rather than quality. I was in Boston earlier this week to attend the Seminar for New Presidents Leadership Program. We called it New Presidents Summer School. And earlier this spring, I attended the APLU's Chief Academic Officer meeting, where all of these challenges were top of mind for every academic executive in attendance. So we recognize these national trends, and we know that there is no institution that is immune from these headwinds. But I can affirm that our university and our state are prepared to meet these challenges and advance during this very important time. And that's because the U is world-class. It is excellent. It's an institution that's earned distinction in the balance that it strikes between tradition and forward thinking, access and excellence, service and outreach, an institution unique in its discovery, the arts, and in the natural assets and commercial depth of its location, grounded in inclusive values, can-do spirit, and an inherent desire to do good work at the highest level. and I'm honored to be a part of it. And our state is world-class as well, with its vigorous partnership and commitment from end to end to educate and serve Minnesotans, in our case through our 5 campuses. This commitment was the key factor drawing me to the university and this presidency. So yes, I can hear and feel the national winds blowing, and I recognize the challenges on our doorstep, but we're undeterred, and rather we're filled with hope and optimism for it's a new day at the university, a day not only to recognize that we benefit from those who have come before us and made this institution great, but that by working together we can be even greater and that our best days lie ahead. So to this end, and to get started on this next chapter, we've been working hard during the transition so that we come together today ready to work. I've reorganized the President's Office staff with an aim not only to be responsive, but also to be lean and nimble with well-defined lines of authority. We've established 2 teams, one for strategy and another for operations, with an overall reduction in headcount and cost. The strategy team is led by Dr. Bill Haldeman, who joins me today. I think I see him, yes, there he is, who, along with my executive assistant, Penny Bellison, Penny, if you want to raise your hand, joined me from South Carolina. And yes, they know it's cold up here. Dr. Bree Keeney and Julie Reavers also play key roles on the strategy team, and those are names that you all have heard before, and I'm very pleased that they're continuing on the team. The operations team is led by Kate Stuckert, who you, I think, all know, who has joined us from the Provost's office, along with Andy Pesch, right next to her. And they are joined by Eve Wolf and Nicole Borneman, who continue from the President's Office team before. I'm very excited about this team, very grateful to them, and thank them in advance for whatever. And I'm firmly convinced that we have the best and strongest team in the country. Adding to the strength of our executive team, we also kicked off 2 senior level searches during the transition this spring. The first is for the Vice President of Human Resources, who will ensure our strategic success by cultivating and championing our greatest asset, which is, of course, our people. So our Senior Vice President for Finance and Operations, Dr. Brian Burnett, is leading this search, which commenced after our Vice President for Human Resources, Kathy Brown, announced that she was stepping down this spring. We will thank Kathy more robustly down the road, but I have to take this moment to thank her for her dedication, for her work for this university, agreeing to stay on until her successor is identified, and being extremely helpful to me personally. The next search we're doing is the Vice President of Human Resources, who will also, the next Vice President for Human Resources will be a member of the Executive Committee and a direct report to me as a reflection of the importance of the role of our people and our overall success. The second search is for our next Executive Vice President and Provost. Again, I must thank Karen Hansen for her dedication and work to this university through the transition and, of course, for many years before. She has been an unbelievable provost. I've had the pleasure of serving with her on the National Board of Provosts and can speak to her national reputation as a result, and she has also been incredibly helpful to me during this transition. So as we look ahead, I'm filled with optimism about the U and this important next chapter for us and for higher education across the country. The responsibility is humbling, but we are both ready and prepared to advance the strength and impact of our system, our legacy of excellence, and the greatness of our community. Members of the board, friends and colleagues, thank you again for your trust and for this tremendous opportunity. I look forward to the weeks and months ahead to working with you and our university community to take leaps where needed, incremental steps as necessary, but to ensure that each step, large or small, moves us forward. When taken together, they will widen the circle of opportunity, innovation, and discovery, and strengthen our bonds, deepen our system's impact, and do so in a manner that honors our institution's legacy. Thank you again for everything, and I look forward to working with you.
Okay. Thank you very much, President Gable, for that first report, and thank you for your very hard work over the last 6 months. In essence, you held 2 jobs, that of President-elect and that of Provost at University of South Carolina. So you really put in an extraordinary amount of work. It's clear that you're going to be able to hit the ground running, and we appreciate that. And I also want to thank members of the community who made themselves so available to President-elect Gable to help her learn what she needed to learn during the transition period. Thank you very much. We're very grateful. And I'll just conclude by saying I'm sure I speak for the board when I say that we share your hope and your optimism for a very bright future for our great university. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I'd like to begin my first report as chair of the board by acknowledging the hard work and the dedication of my predecessor, Regent David McMillan. Regent McMillan served as chair during an incredibly eventful 2-year period at the university, and, this is no exaggeration, he performed yeoman's work on behalf of this great institution. During his tenure as chair, the university saw one success after another, and let me just note a few. A renewed agreement with Fairview and the creation of an mHealth Fairview organization that strengthens all parties, but most importantly, Minnesota and Minnesotans who will benefit from the new research and the patient care. He oversaw the public launch of the Driven campaign, the philanthropic campaign with a goal to raise $4 billion to support our students, our faculty, our research and discovery. I don't think it's a coincidence that the UMD Bulldogs men's hockey team won 2 back-to-back national championships while you were chair. And that will be a tough one to top. And perhaps most importantly, Regent McMillan also oversaw the successful search for the university's 17th president that resulted in the hire of President John Gable. So Regent McMillan, your steady hand led us through these successes, and the university community will be long grateful for your leadership. On behalf of all of us on the board, please accept this token of appreciation for guiding us through the past 2 years.
As hard as Tom Anderson does. Thank you.
I'd also like to express my sincere gratitude to all of you for the opportunity to serve as board chair for the next couple of years. Vice Chair Swigum and I are both looking forward to working together to advance the university's mission, and we are both very highly honored to have been asked to serve in these roles. I also want to thank all of you on this board who have elected to serve in leadership roles, either as chair or vice chairs of committee. I spoke with many of you over the holidays, and I just want to express my gratitude to all of you for your willingness, your great willingness to serve the university in any way that you can. I really appreciate it. Very grateful. So in the coming weeks, our immediate focus is to work closely with President Gable to establish priorities for the coming year and to develop board and committee work plans. These plans will be reviewed and discussed at our September meeting, and I'm sure many times after that. Our ultimate goal is to tightly align our priorities with the president in order to move the university forward. So that concludes my report. We'll move on now to the receive and file point on the agenda, and I'll just note that there are no receive and file reports this month. And now moving to the consent report, we have a number of items in the report this morning. I am interested in item G, the delegation to the president to establish the Advisory Council on Rare Diseases. I'd like us to consider that item separately this morning. Are there any other items in the consent report that members of the board wish to separate out? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the consent report minus item G?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent report with the exception of item G. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing no one who wants to discuss an item, all those in favor of approving the consent report with the exception of item G, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Okay, that item is approved. Now, we'll briefly consider item G. I'm going to ask Christine Keel, the Deputy Chief of Staff for the Dean of the Medical School, to come to the presenters table to address this item. But before I do, I'll seek a motion to approve item G, the delegation to the President to establish the Advisory Council on Rare Diseases.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second, thank you. So we have a motion on the table, and I'll turn to Ms. Keel to provide us with additional information. And is Ms. Keel here?
We'll check.
Okay. Can you, do you think, step in for her and give a briefing or no? No, okay. All right, so then we will,
Mr. Chair, would move to table the item until we have someone that can speak to it.
okay, it's been moved that we table it.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay. So we'll move now to the report of the University of Minnesota Alumni Association. I'd like to invite Lisa Lewis, the president and CEO of the Alumni Association, along with the Alumni Association's outgoing board chair, Doug Hipsch, and incoming board chair, Laura Morit, to join us at the table. So welcome to all of you. We look forward to your report, and you have the floor.
Chair Powell, President Gable, and members of the Board of Regents, good morning. I'm Lisa Lewis, President and CEO of the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, and I'm pleased to be here with two talented and dedicated alumni leaders to share an update on the alumni of the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. Doug Hipsch is the owner of New Life Farms and an Otter Tail County Commissioner. He is a CFANS grad and lives in Perham, Minnesota. Doug did an outstanding job as chair of our board over the last year. And Laura, we're pleased to have her here, is the new chair of the UMAA board. She is the managing director and associate general counsel with Piper Jaffray Companies. She has a bachelor's degree from the College of Liberal Arts and an MBA in finance from the Carlson School. She was a financial analyst for Pillsbury Company before getting a law degree at Northwestern University. We couldn't convince her to get all 3 degrees from the U, but we tried. And Doug is going to start us off today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Powell, President Gable, and members of the Board of Regents. On behalf of the University of Minnesota alumni, I want to extend our warmest welcome to our 17th University President, Joan Gable. It was an honor to serve on the search committee, and we look forward to supporting you as you lead our great university forward. In addition, we congratulate Chair Powell on becoming the university's 27th chair, and Regent Swigum for serving as vice chair. We also welcome our 4 new regents. The UMAA recognizes the volunteer commitment of this entire board, and we appreciate all that you do to serve and lead. The university's success and the value of every University of Minnesota degree is entrusted to you, and we look forward to working with this board to ensure the university continues to grow and prosper for decades to come. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve as the 80th chair of the UMAA Board of Directors this year. The university has had an extraordinary impact on my life, my family, my business, and my town. The education I received from CFANS prepared me to own and operate my family's farm. The friendships that I made at Farmhouse Fraternity have lasted a lifetime. All 3 of my children studied at the U and have taken their degrees and launched careers. It has often been said that the University of Minnesota is the state's economic engine. To make this point, I'm going to talk about my hometown of Perham. Perham is up in Otter Tail County and was recently acknowledged by the Smithsonian as one of the top 30 towns, small towns in America. We have more lakes than any other county in the United States, and Perham is at the center of 1,000 lakes. The U is vital in preserving and protecting these lakes from contamination and aquatic invasive species. As I make in my 6-minute commute to work, it's evident the University of Minnesota is everywhere. The boulevards and parks are full of flowers thanks to a robust master gardener program and a world-class beekeeping center. The fields of potatoes, barley, kidney beans, and corn all have direct ties to CFANS using varieties and precision farming techniques that are developed by the U. The irrigators are managed by the U Irrigator program, preserving water and ensuring the ground is not contaminated. A group of 4-Hers is excitedly getting ready to go to the fair. We contract with the U of M to provide all of our 4-H extension ages, including for 106 at-risk kids from the Boys and Girls Club. I drive by Bongard's cheese plant that has many direct connections to the U in food science and processing. Next, I drive by an expanding Tuffy's dog food and Kenny's Candy, where the owner and president is a University of Minnesota graduate, athlete, and supporter. They export pet foods and candy all over the world. I then go past Arvik Communications. Again, the president and CEO is a graduate of the university, as is his daughter and the probable future CEO. Arvik is a diverse telecommunications company. They have about 1,200 employees and are bringing high-speed internet to rural areas. I then had past a $40 million waste-to-energy plant that was engineered and permitted by the University of Minnesota graduates and owned by a 5-county consortium that provides steam energy to our local processing plants using garbage as fuel. I drive by a multitude of workforce housing, both single and multifamily, constructed by Grow Perm. Incidentally, the president is a U of M graduate. I then go past the new Perm Health Hospital clinic and employs a bunch of doctors, surgeons, and health professionals educated by the U of M. All 5 dentists are products of the U of M. We currently have 4 students in the School of Dentistry. The veterinary clinics are all owned and operated by U of M graduates. There are literally dozens of retail stores, NGOs, and professional businesses owned and run by U of M graduates. The U has been an indispensable and vital part of my life. It's truly been a great year serving as UMAA chair. And now I'd like to turn over to Laura Moret, our new chair of the UMAA board.
Chair Powell, President Gable, and members of the Board of Regents, it's an honor to serve as the Alumni Association's 81st chair of the board. Doug noted how the university has impacted his life, and I know just how he feels. My BA from the College of Liberal Arts and MBA in Finance from the Carlson School prepared me for my career in financial services. I chose to give back to the university first through the Carlson School Alumni Board and helped develop University of Minnesota corporate clubs in companies like 3M and Best Buy, and regional clubs in cities like New York and San Francisco. I've chosen to continue to support the university through the UMAA. I come in as board chair while the university is celebrating its 115th anniversary, and I'm proud to be a part of a long legacy of alumni leaders. In 1904, the University Alumni Association was formed with the idea of welding graduates into a single unit of influence. While our words have changed, our mission remains the same. We were recently reminded of the value of the university connections during an Alumni Association trip to Normandy as part of the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of D-Day. In preparation for this trip, the UMAA staff compiled a booklet which we'd like to give to you later today to give our travelers a snapshot of the dedicated service and sacrifice by University of Minnesota students, alumni, and staff during World War II. We read stories of alumni like George Vaillancourt, who appreciated the Alumni Association magazine as his connection to the university while he was in the Pacific. We communicate with and connect with alumni. Sometimes we may not know the impact we're having on the people's lives at that moment, or how meaningful those relationships will become. So as we celebrate and remember our 115-year anniversary and the legacy of the alumni, we also look forward to the future and how the Alumni Association can continue to collaborate with the university, our alumni, and our students. Today, we'll share the state of the alumni relationship, the Alumni Association's results, and insights on how alumni engagement can contribute to the university. I'll ask our CEO, Lisa Lewis, to take it from here.
Regent Powell, President Gable, members of the Board of Regents, we'll start with the latest snapshot of the U's dynamic global alumni community. There are now 591,000 alumni system-wide. And while many of them choose to live around the country or even around the world, most of them stay right here in Minnesota, 63% in fact, contributing to the Minnesota economy, as we've heard from Doug. And we know they are proud of their degrees. 90% of our alumni told us in our strategic planning survey that they have a good or excellent opinion of the U. And those good opinions matter to engagement. Our latest engagement numbers show that 360,000 alumni have engaged with the University of Minnesota in their lifetime, and 249,000 just within this last year alone. These numbers give us a sense of the breadth of the alumni relationships. They tell us how many people are we reaching, but we also care about the strength of those connections. Our aim is to grow both the reach, the breadth of the relationship, and the depth, the strength of those connections, leading to outcomes that benefit the alumni, the students, and the university. For example, we know that highly engaged alumni are 35 times more likely to make a philanthropic gift to the university than a non-engaged alum. And the average size of that gift is $6,000 more. So engagement matters. If we can get alumni to be more deeply connected in ways that are meaningful to them, everyone wins. All stakeholders benefit. And with so many engaged alumni, they do continue to be generous. In FY18, 39,000 alumni across the system gave over $170 million to the university, representing 54% of all donors and 49% of all gifts. Alumni have continued to play a major role in the foundation's driven campaign. And while we know that philanthropy is one outcome of a good alumni relationship, there's so much more that alumni can do for a university. And since more engagement leads to better outcomes, then the question is, how do we deepen those connections? It starts with research and understanding the interests of the alumni and the priorities of the university. And from there, we shape our programs and services and communications in ways that deliver to both, which we've done through our strategic plan. And we don't do this work alone. This is a truly team effort across the entire system, with the schools and colleges, the foundation, university relations, athletics, student affairs, and so many more. Today, I'm going to focus on the ways a strong alumni relationship benefits the university. Alumni are some of our best brand ambassadors. They are proud advocates for this institution, whether they're hanging their diplomas on the wall, or they're wearing their Gopher gear for their next marathon, or they're sharing the accomplishments of the U with their neighbor. The visible support of alumni in communities around the world enhances the university's reputation. And their success as leaders in their profession brings honor and distinction to the university. The reach is both national and global. Over 50 geographic networks provide opportunities for alumni to connect and represent the university at college fairs through community service, networking, local cultural events, and Big Ten events. Our international connections have grown substantially, with 19 alumni networks in 16 countries. These alumni are our ambassadors in cities around the world, extending the university's brand to every corner we can find. In a recent trip to Tokyo and Shanghai, I had a chance to connect with a number of our international alumni. In Tokyo, our alumni volunteers represent the university at U.S. Embassy-hosted college fairs and run a speaker series for young alumni. In Shanghai, a number of our alumni network leaders recently gathered for a breakfast forum following the Carlson School 100th anniversary event. They shared best practices and were inspired by each other and the alumni connections happening across Asia. For our annual day of service, U of M alumni, students, and friends don maroon and gold, and together provide service in their communities on behalf of the U. In FY19, we held events in 49 cities and 14 states, ranging from Florida and Michigan to Japan and Scotland. And while alumni are terrific ambassadors around the world, we also keep it close to home. This year, the UMAA board approved 3 new affinity networks, which are groups based on common interest. So the Multicultural Alumni Network, the International Student Alumni Network, and the American Indian Alumni Network are now official groups of the UMAA. And all 3 of them were quite active during graduation season, welcoming their newest alumni into their communities and into the larger Alumni Association. And in addition, we are pleased to share with you that there is a new partnership with the Rochester campus. We have a new official University of Minnesota Rochester Alumni Network, and that is now an official group as part of the UMAA. So we're pleased with our partnership there and look forward to serving both Twin Cities and Rochester. We also keep it local by bringing the university to our alumni at major corporations. Our 8 corporate alumni networks are visible examples of the talent pipeline moving from the classroom into the major employers in Minnesota. They host faculty speakers, career networking events, and other activities that bring the university in the maroon and gold into the corporations. Alumni also told us they want more career services, so this year we launched our first career month with a concentrated effort on career services to alumni. There were 22 online and in-person events all over the world that engaged 3,000 participants in its first year. So I'm pleased to say we'll be bringing this back for a second year. We know also that alumni care deeply about student success, and the UMAA continues to create resources that celebrate student accomplishments and bring student and alumni communities together. This year, the UMAA entered into a partnership with the Office of Admissions to help recruit more students nationally. The admissions office identified 12 key markets, and the Alumni Association recruited volunteers in each of those areas. They attended events on behalf of the university, they represented the U at college fairs, and they wrote postcards to students who are from their area after they'd been admitted, encouraging them to come and telling them that, yes, you can come to the U, and then you can go off and have a wonderful and successful career. As students entered the university, we know alumni can play an important role in their success. Last year, we launched the Maroon and Gold Network, which is an online career advice platform funded and managed by the UMAA. We currently have 3,400 alumni and students across 45 states and 35 countries participating in the Maroon and Gold Network. And as this board balances the budget each year, and you're balancing tuition, you're balancing legislative support, the Alumni Association is in partnership with you, using its independent voice to advocate for more funding for the University of Minnesota. And we do this in a number of ways. Minnesota 201 is our statewide alumni network that builds personal, grass-tops relationships with legislators to advocate for the U's legislative agenda. We are on track with our 5-year growth plan to have at least one alum in all 201 legislative districts across the state, with a very high-touch personal relationship, sending the message of the university and its impact on this state. In our second year, the network grew from 50 to 100 members, and they made over 500 high-quality contacts with their legislators in FY19. In addition, several of these volunteers wrote letters to the editor. We had letters published in the Rochester Post-Bulletin, the Worthington Globe, and the Mankato Free Press. The UMAA also continued to advocate for an open and transparent Regent selection process and hosted a forum and reception in January for the 15 candidates that were recommended by the Regent Candidate Advisory Council, and I know many of you were there. In addition, the UMAA maintains regular communication with its 47 alumni legislators and its 100+ alumni who work at the Capitol as staff members. We do an annual event and a number of other communications and touch points with them throughout the year to embrace them as alumni in the alumni community. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Doug Hipsch to wrap up.
Thank you. Regent Powell, President Gable, members of the Board of Regents. The UMAA is an ambitious organization, and while we are proud of our 115-year-old history and our recent accomplishments, we know there is untapped potential among our alumni, and we want to do more for the U. The UMAA is primarily a self-funded organization, and we have a growing entrepreneurial spirit to increase our revenue and expand our services. Recently, we launched a new partnership with the Pillars of Prospect Park, a senior living community on University Avenue, which opens next spring. Through the Alumni Association's involvement, residents will have a deep level of engagement with the university as life members of the UMAA. As our external partnerships grow, the UMAA will be able to capitalize on the full strength and talent of the 493,000 Twin Cities alumni to serve the U. In closing, we are proud of the University of Minnesota degrees and the impacts of the university on the state, nation, and world. As loyal members of the university community, we look to continuing our work with the Board of Regents, President Gable's new administration, and partners across campus. Chair Powell, President Gable, members of the Board of Regents. We will now be able to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all for that report. We always look forward to hearing and having this update. I'll open it up now for questions and comments from Regents. And I see one here, Regent Mayron.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Yesterday, I had the opportunity with Regent Davenport to meet with Lisa Lewis as part of our onboarding as new Regents. And during that discussion, we learned that the Alumni Association basically serves the Twin Cities campus, now has a relationship with Rochester, but that the other systems, campuses, apparently have their own alumni relations and their own alumni, I don't know if it's a board, but their own alumni focus. That was somewhat a surprise to me, as I shared with Lisa at the time. And my hope is, and we did share this with Lisa, that the Alumni Association would work with the other campuses to hopefully bring them under the Alumni Association so that we are working together as an entire system as opposed to 3 or 4 or 5 different systems. I think that there would be some advantages with continuity of communication, with contacting of alum, of broadening the network, but it's also consistent with the direction that we're going of trying to be basically one system, the University of Minnesota system, as opposed to 5 different systems. So I hope this is something that the Alumni Association will take up with the other campuses and look at this issue. I certainly recognize every campus has something different that they are emphasizing, and it's a different experience on each campus, but I think there are so many common threads that could be taken advantage of and avoid some redundancies and with collaboration. So my hope is this is something the Alumni Association will take up with the other campuses as well. I was pleased to hear that Rochester has come under that umbrella.
President Lewis, would you like to respond?
Yes, Regent Powell and Regent Mayron, thank you for that comment. I shared that last August I had a chance to go visit with each chancellor and on each of their campuses and learn more about what they're doing with alumni, and there's really good alumni relations going on across the system. There are areas where we do coordinate, but I think there's areas where we could coordinate even more, and I see it as an and not an or, in that the primary connection between an alum and their institution is going to be their lived campus experience. So we want to respect that, that's kind of the primary linkage. But there are also opportunities if we're going out with President Gable to New York, then all alumni from the entire system should be invited to meet her, not just the Twin Cities. So there are times when we want to weave together, and then there are times when we want to respect the relationship, and knowing when and how to do that. I think that's the strategy and the sweet spot that we're not there yet, but I think we can be, and I look forward to working with President Gable and her administration on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Thank you, presenters. Thank you for the excellent information. I want to kind of echo the remarks made by Regent Mayron. And part of my concern is now that you've added is it Minnesota 201? Minnesota 201, I think, it's a double-edged sword. It brings in some additional resources to help us as we lobby the legislature for resources. But again, since the Alumni Association and therefore 201 being part of the Alumni Association only really represents 2 campuses now, including Rochester, the question is, where does 201 take its direction from? Does it take it from the president's legislative team, or does it kind of do its own thing? We've heard in previous retreats how the university relations team basically supports what the board has approved as our official ask from the legislature, yet a lot of other parts of the university end up lobbying on their own, which is unsupported by that group. And I'm just trying to understand where 201 comes in when it comes to other types of things, especially types of asks from the other 3 campuses that aren't associated.
President Lewis.
Sure. Chair Powell and Regent Hsu, thank you for that question. When it comes to legislative advocacy, we do take a system-wide approach. So if you look at the roster of Minnesota 201 members, you will see more than just Twin Cities. If there's somebody in a position to help who's a University of Minnesota graduate, then we welcome them. So that's that kind of hybrid, we've talked about a little bit. So we're not exclusionary of other alumni from other campuses who may want to help. And Adam Yost, who leads our legislative advocacy effort, he's actually a Morris grad. So he has a real system passion already, and we look at this from a statewide perspective. As far as what we're advocating for, we do not have a separate agenda from the university. We are advocating for the agenda that is set by President Gable and by this board. And Adam on our staff attends government relations staff meetings weekly. And so there is really strong coordination and communication because we're not at cross purposes. When you are working with volunteers, they do have their own views, and so sometimes they might share those, and that might be reflective of exactly what this board thinks. That might be reflective of what they think. And so there's always that balance, and that we're trying to educate and empower and have them speak with their independent voice because that's powerful. They're there as volunteers, but at the same time to be in alignment with the university. So that's something that we work on every day, and I do hear you on the challenges that might present at times.
Just to follow. Thank you, Chair Powell. Thank you for that. I just want to be clear about this. When we approve and ask from the legislature, it's only for specific things. And yet I know volunteers are out there looking for other things for maybe their area of the state or other things. And frankly, it is troubling in some respect that we have this hodgepodge going on. And from a legislative perspective, I think it's confusing for the university to come at them and say, this is what we're officially asking for. But then, here on this page, there's a bunch of other stuff that we'd like to have for the university, whether it's for a particular college or campus or whatever. So that's something that maybe we could discuss as we go on our retreat. But I think it's important for us to have a clear message for the legislature. Otherwise, we just get ripped apart and we end up with less than we could otherwise get.
Okay, thank you, Regent Hsu. Lisa, additional comments or?
I would just add, Chair Powell and Regent Hsu, thank you for that. And if there are specific concerns related to a specific issue that you'd like to share separately, I'd be really interested in learning that to make sure that we are, because I think philosophically we're completely on the same page. We all want to be on the same message. So if there are times when that's not happening, then I'd like to know about that and we could address that.
Thank you. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, presenters. Mr. Hubsch, congratulations on completion of your term and for everything you've done for the university, and you've done a lot. I'm interested in the corporate alumni network. I know that was a brainchild of Ms. Lewis when she came on, and I'm wondering what your sense of how well that's propagating and the quality of those chapters and our ability to increase them, and not just in the private sector, but maybe in some of the public sector organizations, large organizations. And I know millennials, whatever, are, this sort of thing should appeal to connection during work hours, during the lunch hour, at work. But I'd like to get a sense from you how that's all going.
President Lewis.
Regent Powell and Regent Beeson, thank you for that question. We are proud of the ability to bring the university to them in ways that are easy and meaningful to them, and bringing the visibility of the university's presence in those corporations is important. As far as how they're going well. They do a number of, there's a volunteer group in each of those that manages and leads and does the real work of each group. We have a staff member that supports that. As far as growth, we don't have a growth plan right now. We have a status quo plan on those 8, and that is just simply driven by resources. We don't have the ability to manage more than that at this point.
Thank you. Regent Anderson.
Thank you, Chair Powell. On a serious note, I Want to thank the Alumni Association for all their work with Minnesota Sparks. I know it's a huge human effort and it takes financial resources, but I think it's really vital to spreading our mission. And as a land-grant institution, bringing our professors to rural parts of the state, telling them what we're doing at the University of Minnesota. And I've attended a lot of them. Some have had big crowds, some haven't. But I hope it's something we don't get away from because I think it's important. So I wanted to just thank you for that, and I won't take long. And I do have a bit of levity here. President Hibbsch and I have gotten to know each other over the last couple of years. We both come from western Minnesota. I'm from Alexandria, and he's from Perham. And first of all, I just want to say, Doug, that I didn't know you had that many lakes in Perham. And for our lakes in Alexandria, I am now going to start expressing quality over quantity. And you, in your opening session, you told us about virtually everything that's ever came out of Perham, except what a lot of rural Minnesota young people and students dream of being. They dream of being Golden Gopher athletes. And off the top of my head, I am just sitting here thinking of center fielder Charlie Nelson, who was one of the greatest baseball players we had, drafted by the Dodgers. Our long snapper on the football team, who just graduated, Peyton Jordahl, came on as a walk-on, earned a scholarship, and I think he just graduated this year. I hope we don't miss him because I think in 4 years of snapping the football, extra points, field goals, and punts, he never had a bad snap. And I think we have a new freshman on campus, Mr. Logan Richter, defensive tackle from Perham. So as hard as it is for me to say, those are other contributions of Perham to the University of Minnesota that Doug forgot. So if he wants to respond, thank you for that too.
Chair Powell, can I respond? There's another athlete, Gabe Grunwald Anderson, that just passed away. She was an near Olympian, and second place. She died of cancer, 32 years old. She was from Perham, and just a great individual and good representative of Perham and of the U, and we were sad to see her go last week, so a couple weeks ago. So,
I realize that. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Swigum.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Lisa, if I could take off on Regent Sue's questions a little bit about the legislative advocacy involvement. And I want to look ahead 2 years from now when we get to the next phase of appropriation that the legislature does. In preparation for that, I'm a firm believer that you don't go in during the legislative session and just ask for something at that point, because you've got hundreds of groups that are asking legislators at that time for something. You got to develop a relationship in advance. So when Doug comes in supporting the university appropriation request, by the way, I thought we would have done a little better this year when I saw the global agreement. I thought it was opposed to Minnesota State, we might get another 10 or 15 million, but we didn't. Do you have any plans to have this advocacy involvement ongoing, so we develop the relationship in the next 2 years, so people, the alumni who are involved, know their representative, their senator? It's not just call them in April and say we want the money that the Board of Regents requested. You got to develop a relationship in the next few years. Do you have any thoughts, ideas, plans to do that, so you just don't engage people in April of, what would that be? That would be 2021 then, right? That we do it over the next 2 years.
President Lewis.
Yes. Chair Powell and Regent Swigum, thank you for that question, and that's exactly the purpose of Minnesota 201, is it's relational, not transactional, for exactly what you said. So as we're building, we move from 50 to 100. These aren't just random people these are people that we are identifying who either have an existing relationship with their legislators because they're politically connected in the community, or they are willing to do exactly what you said and build that over time. So it's so good legislative advocacy is all relational and it's ongoing. And so that's what Adam is managing. We are keeping them informed. We're asking them to have coffees, to, whether they're in Rotary together or whether they're at church. This is all about that deep connectivity so that, our goal is that when President Gable is walking down the hall in the Capitol and they see her, that the Minnesota 201 member that's been with them for the last 2 years pops in their head. And it's not just President Gable that's there talking to them, but it's President Gable and it's the alumni constituency that are their voters that are also popping in their head at the same time. That's the goal because that's the power of it. She's delivering the message, but it's the year-round relationships of people and the voters in their community that care about the University of Minnesota and have expressed that on an ongoing basis that helps them make those decisions.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you. Good
All right.
planning, good preparation.
Thank you. Thank you. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I also thank the folks that are involved, those of you that are willing to serve in these positions. We know a little bit about uncompensated service to the university, and I know that you put in incredible service for the university through your support and leadership of the Alumni Association. As I was first reviewing the docket and then in the presentation, it dawned on me that it feels almost like an introductory conversation, and when you consider the changes with a new president and with many new members of the board and new leadership of the board, that seems appropriate. So to some extent, where I might get a little more into some of the guts of these conversations, I give some folks a chance to kind of catch up on this stuff as we go. But there are some interesting concepts that were brought up today, and I just want to touch on them briefly. The campus issue is one that I think about. Certainly. It is a fairly significant opportunity for the Alumni Association of traditionally the Twin Cities and now with this relationship with Rochester to have a chance to give this presentation, but we haven't had that same annual opportunity for the other campus alumni associations. And so I certainly am always interested in understanding what's going on with that. And I think that there have been interesting points made already by my colleagues about how we can sort of keep tying that together. And I think that's been answered quite well. I do want to talk a little bit. I know that there are some resources that are provided by the university in support of the Alumni Association. And so while I think that we do great work in generating revenue for the Alumni Association through the network and through the things the Alumni Association does and memberships and so on, there still is a pretty, I think, significant investment, and that's important in a conversation that I know has been going on for some time on how we, what's the long-term impact of that investment? How should it look going forward? And again, letting some folks catch up on these things. These are, I think, important conversations. I think that the Alumni Association does best in the alumni connection. I think that those opportunities, you see this in the conversation about the service members during the war, and I think that's the one thing that the Alumni Association can do in a way that the institution is unable to do it. And I see that more than of the legislative focus. I want to just be a little bit of the canary on this in saying that when we talk about the relationships between alumni and legislators, if it comes down to sheer numbers and we're in competition with the other public higher ed system, we're going to get crushed. They have a lot more people than we do, a lot more alumni, a lot more people that whether they get a 2-year degree and so on and so forth. So those relationships are important, but it's also about, we have to be prepared to make the argument as to why this is a different kind of an investment. If it's sheer numbers, then as we see, we will have some challenges. But I also want to talk about a little bit about the importance of the propriety of all we do. And President Lewis and I have had conversations on the side about this. When we have somebody speak to legislators wearing the badge of the Alumni Association, there's a lot of weight there. We provide legislators a lot of information about how many alumni live in their district and what impact the university has on their individual district. So when that person goes in, they really need to understand the importance of maintaining the university's position. If they deviate, if they have other personal interests, other personal perspectives, they're certainly entitled to those, but we have to be very clear that they should not be using the imprimatur of the Alumni Association to do that. I liken it to regulations for those serving in the military. And if you're active duty, you can't be part of partisan politics. But if you're in the Guard, for instance, you cannot do anything in conversation with those kinds of things where it appears that you're representing the military. You can do it as an individual. And I see that sort of that same consideration here, but we just have to be very, very careful that somebody doesn't translate the importance and the reputation of the Alumni Association for things that may not be the official position of the institution. And so it's an ongoing conversation, but I do think it bears mentioning as we talk about this, because as President Lewis knows, I'm always a little bit concerned when we put the resources in that category to make sure that we don't find ourselves at cross purposes that way. But within that, I think that, obviously, just as with our faculty, who I think that we can always continue to employ to make the case for why support from the legislature is critical and what the university is able to provide for the state is essential. But I think that what the Alumni Association does for bringing alumni together is really so important to the institution. And, I know it's, for many of the folks with whom I went to school, it's the one connection that they maintain with the university. So I just want to thank you for all that you do in that regard. Thanks.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. President Lewis, would you like to respond?
Regent Powell, Regent Rocha, thank you. I hear you. That's all I'll say. I hear you on the legislative piece.
Okay, well, thank you for those questions and comments. I would just like to thank you, President Lewis, again for your report. We look forward to it and appreciate it, and we appreciate your leadership. Ms. Morit, welcome as board chair. We look forward to working with you. And Mr. Hibbs, thank you so much for your service, and not only this year, but past many years. And I just want to say I've heard the story of Otter Tail County that you tell. I've heard it it's a great story. It really is a good story, and we probably ought to be able to tell that story for every county in the state. It's a very, very powerful, sort of story of the impact of the university. Thank you. So thank you for that, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Right. So now we'll return to consideration of the delegation to the President to establish the Advisory Council on Rare Diseases. And in order to do this properly, I first need a motion to take that item from the table. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Second. Thank you. All those in favor of taking from the table the motion to approve the delegation to the President to establish the Advisory Council on Rare Diseases, please say aye. 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 Opposed? Thank you. That motion is approved. And now that we have the motion back on the table, I'll turn to Ms. Keel to provide us with additional information, and welcome Ms. Keel.
Regent Howells and members of the board, thank you. President Gable, welcome. The Rare Disease Advisory Council was a legislative initiative. As you know, it was not on our list last year. And it was presented by a mom who lost a child to rare diseases to Senator Jeremy Miller and Representative Elise Mann. They carried the initiative forward. It passed with funding for 4 years at $150,000. And since it was not a legislative request coming from the university, that is why you see the ultimate chapter enactment with the request of the Board of Regents to designate and establish such an advisory council.
Thank you. Can you comment on the scope and duration of the council?
Sure. So the scope is basically to have expertise from not only the university, but Mayo, patient advisory groups. There's a dentist who will be on the group to look at ways that research, areas of care that is being done. There's more than 7,000 rare diseases, and we cannot, as the university, be everything to everyone. And the advocate who brought this forward understands that. And so the Advisory Council really wants to develop a hub for patients or caregivers of someone with a rare disease as a way to find maybe where they can go seek treatment, be a part of a clinical trial, learn about research that is going on with rare diseases. If it's not here, where else in the United States?
Okay, thank you. And I take it that the dean and the medical school is supportive of the initiative.
Correct. The dean has a rare disease research that he does, and so he's supportive of this.
Okay. I think we have a question from Regent Beasley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Keel, for the presentation. I've been watching this bill make its way through the legislature. Maybe it's been over a couple of years. And part of the reason is I have a grandson who's a survivor of a rare disease. We call them orphan diseases. And luckily, he has a champion at Northwestern University for his heart condition that he was born with. But this is a couple things. One, the demand for resources might exceed the budget that we've appropriated. This could take a life of its own, and that's not all bad. Because these parents and the caregivers and the families need a place to go to help with information, and what a great place to have this than the University of Minnesota. This could be a source of research. Every one of these rare diseases gets very little attention around the country, very little, and they're deadly. A little bit of work can go a long ways to cure those. So I'm actually very excited to see this develop here, and what form it goes, I think is a question. I remember when I joined the board, President Kaler called me in February. He said, I'd like you to come out to dinner with the president or the football coach of Florida State University, Jimbo Fisher, and his wife. I said, well, we had a football coach then, we have a football coach now. I said, what's Jimbo Fisher doing in Minnesota in the dead of winter? Turns out he has son or sons that have a disease called Fanconi's anemia, a rare disease. And he came here because we are the center for that treatment and cure. Turns out my next door neighbor has a child with that same disease. We saved this child's life, and we've saved hundreds of people's lives through Dr. Wagner and his staff. That's a rare disease. Living proof that we can have an impact. And there's thousands of families in this state who need the hope that the Fishers got through our doctors here. So I'm excited about it. I don't know, again, this could be a big project, but this is what we do. We take on big projects, and this is a combination of a lot of little diseases that are really difficult.
Thank you, Regent. Regent Her.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a question with regards to the appropriation. Do you think that's enough funding to do this work, or would the university have to augment it with space, staff, coordination, and what would that look like?
Regent Powell. So right now, when we were discussing this with Senator Miller throughout the process, we made it very clear that this is to be a hub activity. And so the research itself, if there would be any, researchers would have to seek grant money to continue that. This is not about funding research. It is to establish, and we made it clear also that this would be an administrative person doing this, because they criticize us often for administrative issues. And so we made that clear throughout the process too, that this is an administrative position. It is a person who would act, I use the term navigator throughout the session, to help people connect and find where they can go. And so the appropriation that we received will be enough to start the council, dig in more. And of course, if we get down the road 4 years past the initial appropriation, if we would need more, that would be a decision of this board.
Thank you.
Can I make one additional statement? Since we bring up the legislature a lot, I do want to acknowledge them and to thank them, to see us as a leader, that we can be problem solvers, connectors, and seeing us in this role. So kudos to the legislature for that.
Thank you for that comment, Regent Her. Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Thank you, Ms. Keel. And thank you for the other regents who have spoken on this. I think it is clearly something that the university should be involved in. I think maybe 150,000, I guess that's one person plus some expenses maybe. Correct. And so obviously it's a start. I think it's something that we should look at as we do our strategic planning, whether or not university should be a bigger player with regard to rare diseases, at least in the state of Minnesota and probably throughout the world. So I do support this. I appreciate the legislature thinking about this. But then on the other hand, I want to also say that, this is coming to us without us kind of going out and looking for it. And so I'm wondering if in the future we can, whether it's this issue or other issues, we can catch on to these things a little bit sooner before, and I understand that everything in the legislature is dynamic, but it would be nice if we were to initiate these types of things and say, this is what the state needs, this is, and through our flagship is how we're going to provide it, and finally, appropriate monies for it somewhere. So I support this and look forward to it.
Thank you, Regent Hsu. Ms. Keel, would you like to respond to Regent Hsu's comment?
Regent Powell and Regent Hsu, the university has annually a rare disease day that the Center for Orphan Drugs and the Stem Cell Institute together put on. And so we've been a leader in bringing patient advocacy groups and parents or caregivers of people with rare diseases. And so we've been a leader, and so this just seems like the next natural step.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keel. I see no other questions, and so therefore, there being no further discussion and the motion, original motion being on the table, all those in favor of approving the delegation to the President to establish the Advisory Council on Rare Diseases, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion is approved. Okay. We'll next turn to intercollegiate athletics. The board will hear the annual report on intercollegiate athletics, and joining us is Athletic Director Coyle, Deputy Athletic Director McFarland, and Senior Associate Athletics Director Thomas. Welcome to the meeting and to the podium. Director Coyle, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, good morning, Chair Powell and Board of Regents. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come in and give a quick update on our athletic program. We wanted to go through just a quick overview of our program, and you're good to go? All righty, we have 25 programs, which is the fourth highest number of programs in the Big Ten. We have 675 student athletes. We have 275 full-time employees. And our FY operating budget for FY20 will be $123 million. Academically, we have our highest cumulative grade point average of a 3.29. That is a school record. We had 373 academic all Big Ten honorees in 2018 and 19, and 118 Big Ten distinguished scholars. Those are both school records. We had 8 COSIDA academic All-America and 16 all-district honorees, which were school records. Our program has a 93% graduation rate, which is tied for first among the Big Ten public institutions. And we had 6 of our programs that had a perfect APR multi-year score, and 12 programs had a perfect single-year APR score. Athletically, we had back-to-back top 20 finishes in the Directors' Cup. That's the first time, or the second time in the last 15 years. And in perspective, there's over 350 Division I programs, and us finishing in the top 20 means we're finishing in the top 6% of the country athletically. We were 5th among the Big Ten schools, and among that, in the Big Ten this past year, our average team finishes were second only behind Michigan in Big Ten standings. We had 4 teams win conference titles, and 13 teams advanced to NCAA postseason appearances. Of course, we had our first bid to the Women's College World Series. Our men's basketball team advanced to the NCAA tournament. Women's hockey finished runner-up, and we had 2 individual champions and 9 individual Big Ten champions this past year. An important note, the border battle against Wisconsin, we won it for the 9th time in 11 years. And finally, we were the only Power 5 school in the country that had a winning record in every team sport. So that goes from the Pac-12, the SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Big 12. We were the only Power 5 program that had a winning record in every team sport.
Regent Powell. Regents. As we were developing our fiscal year 2020 budget, we determined that for the athletic department to be able to operate within the revenues we estimated we will generate for the upcoming year, both sport programs and support units would have to submit budgets at levels lower than their fiscal 2019 budgets. While this will create challenges in the competitive environment that is college athletics, we are not alone at the University of Minnesota. You've probably read articles that other Power 5 institutions have had athletic departments that are instituting budget cuts. This first slide displays our budgeted revenue of $123.5 million. This is approximately a $2 million increase over last year's budget. Of these categories, we identify two that we can impact the most, and that is ticket sales and fundraising. It has been a priority for our staff this year to institute and to execute programs that will increase fan engagement and improve the fan experience at our events. This, we hope, will then generate additional revenue and scholarship seating donations. On the expense side of the equation, we're anticipating substantial increases in two of the larger expense categories, scholarships and personnel. Due in a large part to the increase in the non-resident, non-reciprocity tuition, we expect that our scholarship expense will increase by about $1 million this year. In addition, the budget for the personnel costs is about $1.9 million higher in fiscal year 20 than it was in 19. And this is due in a large part to the 2.25% merit increases and the increase in the fringe benefit rates. In addition, fiscal year 2020 is the first full year that these scholarship seating donations that are tied to season ticket sales is subject to sales tax. We anticipate that this 11% sales tax will have a $700,000 to $800,000 impact annually. Fortunately, by increasing donor support, reducing operating expenses, creating more efficient processes, and delaying some facility repair and renewal projects, we were able to submit a budget with a small surplus for fiscal year 20 without negatively impacting our 675 student athletes. To further demonstrate the environment in which we compete, here's a graph that shows the comparison of fiscal year 2018 and 19 budgets for the 14 Big Ten institutions. As you can see from the color-coded bars, we are 8th out of the 14. Across the bottom, it lists the number of sports that each school sponsors. So while we are tied for 4th in the number of sports we sponsor, we are 8th in terms of budget. I believe that in light of the academic and athletic successes mentioned earlier in this presentation, this indicates that Gopher Athletics operates efficiently and does a good job of utilizing the resources available. With that, I'll turn it back over to Director Coyle.
Thank you. And next, we'd like to talk quickly about our facilities. As you know, in the world of college athletics, providing a first-class experience for all of our 675 student athletes in our programs is the utmost priority for us. And we've had a chance to do several new facilities this year, thanks to the support of you. And we've been able to go out and we've raised the money for these facilities. And the new facilities that we completed this past year were the David E. Moody Golf Facility. We have a new Gopher Wrestling Facility. We have the new Minnesota Track and Field Stadium that opened up a year ago. We have the Gene K. Freeman Aquatic Center renovations, and then we have TCF Bank Stadium turf replacement that was done as well. And we have some ongoing projects. If you recall, we have the Volleyball Performance Center at Matray Pavilion that will be completed this August. So in about 4 weeks, that project will be done. We also have locker room renovations at Gibson-Nagurski that will impact a lot of our programs, from women's track and field to the softball program to the rowing program. And then also at the last board meeting, we received approval to do some renovations to 3 Marina at Mariucci, and we're working on those right now. And in terms of fundraising for Athletes Village, which has had a significant impact on our program, we continue to have strong fundraising results and are very pleased in the direction we're going in paying down the debt service on that facility. Joel.
Chair Powell and members of the board, I thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. So as I hope you will see from these slides, we've worked hard to introduce significant change to the Health and Performance Unit over the past year. Our goal as a unit has been increased communication and collaboration amongst the individual departments in the Health and Performance Unit. The unit is comprised of 4 departments: athletic performance, athletic medicine, sports nutrition, and sports psychology. One of the first things that we did was we worked to restructure the unit in order to facilitate this collaboration and communication. This was done by moving each of the departments onto a set and equal footing and then creating a tiered unit within each of the departments. This offers not only increased opportunities for our staff in terms of leading and mentoring, but also shows a path for advancement for some of our younger staff members. Additionally, we created a reporting line with football athletic performance that reports now to health and performance. Traditionally and historically, football athletic performance has reported solely to the head football coach, and we are not alone in having that reporting structure. So this past fall, we changed so that there is now also a reporting line through the health and performance unit for our football athletic performance unit. We've also increased the participation and the leadership voice of our medical director, Dr. Bradley Nelson. This has allowed us to set forth that we have independent and autonomous medical care. Dr. Nelson has no reporting lines within athletics and instead reports directly to the Dean of the School of Medicine. As you've seen, in order to increase communication, that usually means that you need more committees and meetings. So we've tried to be diligent and efficient in the way that we put those together. The first is the Sport Performance Review Committee, which is a group of all of the unit directors and our medical director. They meet monthly and are tasked with overseeing and approving any new performance or medical technology before it comes into the department, researching and approving any research request grants that come either from within the institution or outside of it, as well as providing updates and reviewing policies and procedures for the unit as a whole. The Health and Performance Collaboration Meeting is an additional meeting that we have now monthly where all health and performance members are invited to attend. This is an opportunity for all of the unit to come together, and the agenda is vast and varying at each of our meetings. And then finally, the mental health care meeting. Because of the increasing need for mental health resources, our Director of Sports Psychology Services has organized a weekly meeting for all of the healthcare practitioners that work with any of our student athletes that have mental health concerns. They meet weekly during the academic year and then every other week during the summer. Additionally, as we look to restructure this unit, we were really focused on how we can best improve and implement both best practices and evidence-based guidelines that are related to health and performance. As you know, and as you've seen, NCAA legislation is consistently changing. New pieces are being introduced, and we're constantly changing what's already there. So it's been really important for our unit to take a forefront and always be at the front of where these changes are coming from. Additionally, we've undertaken a review of all policies and procedures and any updates that are needed for the entire unit. The goal is to revise, edit, implement, and then also have in a readily available space all of those policies. We worked with the U.S. Council for Athletes' Health, the USCAH, for an external review, and we continue to partner with them as they help provide an external voice and approval system for what we are trying to do. So with that review, there were a set of powerful practices, and there were also a set for areas of growth and development. So as we look at the powerful practices, in particular, the vision and mission, which is to provide a unified and optimal healthcare experience for all of our student athletes. This is emphasized by our adherence to the independent medical care model. Additionally, a culture that has been developed of integration and collaboration. The sum is always greater than the parts, and in particular in medical and healthcare, it's important that we have all units working together and moving in the same direction. Department communication is an area that we've really tried to drill down on, and we have increased that so that we now have multi-level and we have various opportunities for communication, both within the individual departments and the unit as a whole. And then finally, the organizational structure. So the restructure that we talked about on the previous slide was noted as a powerful practice because of the way that we have created this tiered system, which allows, again, for that mentoring and leading from all members of the unit. As with any review, we also had areas of continued improvement, in particular, policies and procedures. So continuing to revise, to find gaps in our policies, and to continue to move those forward, have them readily available, and have them all in one spot. Additionally, continuing to build out our independent medical care model. So although we adhere to it, but continuing to remind coaches, staff, and student athletes that athletic medicine always wins in a healthcare decision. So continuing to have that in place, we have done things like emailed all of the staff, we've discussed it in meetings, we have talked about it with our student athletes. We also emphasize again that Dr. Nelson does not report to athletics. So whenever there are areas of concern, or if someone is uncomfortable bringing it up through athletics, there is always another chain for them. In terms of staff, we have quite a few young staff members who are eager and are passionate, and we will work to continue to grow them. In addition, we will continue to look at what outside healthcare resources are most appropriate for our student athletes, and we have in place a process for how they can come into the department and work with our student athletes. Additionally, education, which is always a strong part of what we're trying to do. One example of that is this August. We've been working with our sports psychology department, and we'll be launching a mental health training seminar for all of our coaches. After we run through with our coaches the first time, we'll make necessary adjustments, and then we'll work through with our support staff as well. And then finally, ongoing review. So continuing to look at what we do, continuing to look at how we put things together, and how we can continue to be a leader in our healthcare delivery. And I cede the floor back to Director Coyle.
Thank you, Joy. And finally, we wanted to talk about, briefly, we recognize, right or wrong, that we are the most visible unit on this campus. And we are very proud of the work we've been doing with the President's Prevention of Sexual Misconduct Initiative. And here you can see some quotes from some of the leaders of that initiative here on campus. But we continue to have a very, very strong relationship with EOA, with the Office of Community Standards, and we continue to be very proactive in our education of our student athletes. And yes, matters will arise, but please know that we continue to try to be at the forefront of this initiative on campus and trying to set the example of doing things the right way. So we just wanted to bring this to your attention, that we continue to focus on this, and this will continue to be a priority for our department as we move forward to not only provide a great experience for our student athletes, but provide a great experience for everybody who is a part of Gopher Athletics. So with that, Chair Powell, we would welcome any questions or comments from you or your colleagues.
Well, thank you for the presentation, Director Coyle and presenters. I'm sure there will be questions. Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Powell, and thanks to each of you for that presentation. First of all, a compliment. What are there? But a question to make the compliment: are there 60 or 60-some teams, Power 5 teams?
Chair Powell, Regent McMillan, there are 65.
65. So the only winning record of 65.
According to our Marine Relations Department, yes.
That is remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. Wow. Okay, now on to questions. So congratulations. That's a fascinating statistic and one you should be proud of. I am very pleased and impressed with the review of the health and performance conversation there. And it looks to me like you're getting to the right balance of what I'll call structural, which is, org chart in many ways, programmatic work, and then culture. And I was very struck and pleasantly struck by your comment that in a medical athletic, issue, the medical side of that always wins. So here's my question. So great. That is really, really great to see and hear, and for you to pull it up to the forefront for us, I think is really, really important. Two questions now. How do you evaluate best, or you use the term powerful practices, in a ongoing way? I just love a little vignette of how you go about doing that. And then secondly, how do you keep a lid on the growing number of committees that's going to, and the administrative expense side? This will start to look like a Presbyterian church, and I'm a Presbyterian, where there's a committee for everything under the sun. So do those questions make sense?
Yeah,
Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. So Chair Powell, Regent McMillan. So yes, it is important to not let committee work overtake the actual work of being in health and performance and being a clinician. So we've been very cognizant that the load that our staff carries must be, the student athlete must still always come first. So these 3 committees that we have put into place, we try to offer them in a way where we're very efficient with our time. We do not plan out meetings to plan meetings. We try to accomplish as much as we can that doesn't require true face-to-face discussion over email or putting systems in place. So for example, if we are researching a new piece of technology, let's say that we have a coach and an athletic performance coach come together and they see a new piece of motion capture video that they'd like to implement with baseball. Okay, so we already have a system in place where the onus is on the coach and that strength coach to put all of the paperwork together, to highlight all of the questions that we have regarding HIPAA, protected health information, cost, is it reasonable, does it work, and then, only then, does it come to our committee. So what we've tried to do is put a lot of the onus onto the individuals who are trying to bring these things forward. Now, on the flip side, the mental health meeting, we will not deviate from the weekly, only because so much information can be shared in those weekly meetings with those healthcare professionals, and we found it's really increased the efficiency of how we handle mental health cases, in particular when we feel that they need an additional referral, for example, to Boynton. On the other side of that, as we talk about best practices and evidence-based, we like to say that we really focus on evidence-informed decisions because we still like to be cutting edge. So we spend a lot of time with our units just having open dialogue and open conversations. We're really fortunate in that a lot of our staff has come from a lot of different areas, so they bring a wealth of experience with them, so that helps us expose to things that we may not necessarily have right at the forefront.
Thank you.
Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the presenters. And since you won't read about the good news in the local papers, I'll take the liberty to do that. And thank you. Those data points are really impressive. And it feels like your administration, Mr. Coyle, is really settling in now, and we are very supportive. Because we're in these mega conference models now, the choice of a Big Ten commissioner is more important than ever, and we're pleased about Mr. Warren from Minnesota being picked as a commissioner. I don't know whether you have a sense of what his priorities are going to be or what style he's going to bring to the table, but trying to connect some dots in the conversations today. I would like to see the Big Ten take on children's health as a co-brand. I know we do a lot of impressive work with Masonic, or I see our athletes there all the time. Other schools are doing stuff with, but these are school by school, and to do something more strategic. I think football needs that. I think our athletes want that, and there is no higher ground than children's health. We talked a half an hour ago about rare diseases. These kids are housed in our hospitals across the way, and they have no plan, they have no hope, or they're very ill. So something, and Mr. Warren is a healthcare, he's given publicly to this university in our healthcare. So I would hope, and President Gable, as you step into that position on the committee, that you'll think about how to work this brand at a higher level than it is even now.
Chair McMillan and Regent Beeson, thank you for those comments. And as you're aware, with our 675 student athletes, they're very involved. In fact, our football program, Coach Fleck and his wife Heather in our football program do a lot with our Children's Hospital here on campus. Royalties from Row the Boat go towards, those are donations made back to the Children's Hospital. But that's definitely a conversation we can have with our colleagues at the Big Ten. And of course, I would follow President Gable's lead on that conversation.
Thank you. Regent Shue.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Thank you, presenters. Thank you, Director Coyle. An excellent report. Things seem like they're on the up and up. I did notice that Michigan announced they had a meeting probably before us. They have announced their budget for FY20, and it's close to, I think it was $195 million, which pretty much dwarfs ours. In addition to, if you look at the chart here, these are old numbers. You can see where how big a difference that is. In Ohio State, obviously, with 39 sports, is significantly higher than Michigan. I'm wondering what we can do and how maybe if you could give us an idea of how we can erase that, the 9% debt number from our finances, our financial budget for FY20. How many years is it going to take us to eliminate the debt associated with projects that we have ongoing?
Director Coyle, is the question clear?
No, Chair Powell.
Okay, let me rephrase that. Sorry. In terms of the 9% of debt, 9% looks like a big number when you compare it to the $123 million of budgeted expenses. When we approved the Athletes Village project several years ago, I think we had assumed that we would end up taking care of all that debt at some point in the recent future. And now that we're about 5 years down the road from that, how many more years is it going to take to eliminate that?
Chair Powell and Regent Hsu, thank you for the question. If you will, I heard a comment about 15 years ago when I was at a convention in college athletics, and they said money's not the most important thing in college athletics, but it's right up there with oxygen. And I've never forgotten that comment. And I can tell you, with Athletes Village, when we talk about we're having very strong fundraising results right now, Dusty Clements and our Golden Gopher Fund are doing a really, really good job working closely with Kathy Schmilikoff and the UN Foundation. We're on Athletes Village alone. I think we're chasing about $115 million overall for the whole Nothing Short of Greatness campaign. We're at about $135 million towards that goal. So we do have some work to go. I believe that debt service runs out through 25 years that we worked with Brian Burnett in his office, but obviously we're very aware, and when I talked earlier on the other facilities that we've done this year, we've raised that money beforehand because we're very conscious of that debt service, and we clearly understand that when we come in front of this board and in front of President Gable, we have to have a budget that makes our budget, so we'll continue to operate that way and try to be as fiscally responsible as we can.
Regent Hsu, a follow-up?
Thank you, Chair Powell. Thank you, Director Coyle. On a different note, there's been significant media attention to the Varsity Blues scandal, of which we have not been mentioned, thank goodness. And I was just wondering if you could give us a little bit of background in terms of whether or not something like that could happen here, meaning do we have situations where we have athletes coming into the program based on their talents, athletic talents, in bypassing the admissions process?
Chair Powell and Regent Hsu, thank you for the question. I don't know if I can predict the future, but what I can tell you at the University of Minnesota, we have a very robust process for admitting student athletes. We work closely. We obviously have our faculty athletic reps, Dr. Holmans and Dr. Leo. We work closely with Bob McMaster and campus on that process. And I know we feel very optimistic about the process and the procedures we have in place where something like that would not happen. I believe you have a chance to hear from Director of Compliance Jeremiah Carter shortly. We have a very strong relationship with them and our partnership with them. So again, I'm hopeful that we have everything in place that would prevent something like that. And again, I feel like we have the safeguards in place to make sure we make the best decisions when we do admit our student athletes. And finally, I'll end with this. We're very proud of what our student athletes do academically. I talk about being one of the top public schools in the country. We make it very, very clear to our coaches when they start to recruit these young men and women that they have to compete on this campus academically and athletically. We make that very, very clear, and I feel like we do a very good job of bringing in student athletes who can compete in the classroom with the students they're sitting next to, because this campus continues to evolve and rise with great academic metrics, and we want to make sure that our student athletes can compete in the classroom as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just touch on a few points real quickly. First, I think it's pretty remarkable. I see the size of that budget, and it dawns on me that that's about 10% of the university's total budget in '95. I mean, it's an awful lot of money, and I noticed that our oxygen level has remained fairly flat during that same period. Director Coyle, when you talked about the NRNR the effect of the NRNR tuition, increase in tuition costs. I mean, as I said at this table before, I think there's an advantage to that, to the price itself, to the extent that it helps in, when our coaches are recruiting and you're offering a non-resident an opportunity to come and compete at the University of Minnesota on scholarship, that the value, the street value, if you will, of that is in competition. I mean, one of our colleagues has been quoted in stories about the impact of a Northwestern being able to offer a very, very valuable scholarship versus a school that would have a lower tuition rate. Now, we may land in a different spot in the remedy for that disparity, but I think that this actually will tend to help. But I certainly don't like the idea that it hampers the department. And so I'm interested in knowing how other schools handle this. So when NRNR tuition rates go up, is there a way of not having that, a punitive effect on the department's budget? Because I don't think that's anybody's intention as it relates to this. And when I think about it from the standpoint of, well, when a student athlete comes in from out of state, are they replacing a non-resident versus a resident? I mean, would it make sense? Are there institutions that would charge only the resident rate for people that come in and compete on scholarship, which would, I think, alleviate that difficulty for the department? So I'm interested in best practices at other institutions and whether there are things that we can do, or whether it's something that we feel comfortable addressing as a department. So I'm interested in your thoughts on that. Second thing, and this coming on the heels of the Alumni Association presentation just prior, I thought a lot about the relationship of former athletes and how that's developed. And if you could just make a comment on this. I've always thought that it would serve an institution well to say we're going to have the best relationship with our former athletes of any school in the nation. When I've been at other institutions, I oftentimes see that there will be significant facilities that have been funded by a former professional athlete or an alumnus of that institution, and that we would be committed to making sure that when someone becomes when someone wears the Gopher colors in athletic competition, that they're joining a fraternity that lasts a lifetime, and that there's some real benefits to that. And I know that there are some of those things, but I'd be very interested to know sort of what the status of that is, not necessarily today, but at some point, but just making that commitment that no school will be better to our former athletes than our institution. And I know the public is always sort of aware of that, that obviously you don't want to be throwing people away on injury and other things, but even beyond that, people that graduate and keep that relationship. And then finally, because this is a public board, I will just make the public commentary as a longtime fan, season ticket holder. Thank you for the improvements that you're making in issues like affordability and access to various sports. I would urge us to continue to do even more. I'm a strong believer that I'd rather have 50,000 people in the stands at $40 than 25,000 at 80. Obviously there are other benefits to that and concessions and so on, but in terms of environment and building that kind of energy, you have done a great job in recovering from what I feel as a longtime Gopher and Gopher fan, some errors in prior years that affected things like loyalty. When we've moved and changed seating and you've had people that have been fans forever and they get knocked out of their seats, and trying to regain those relationships, that's not easy. And I think that you've made some strong steps in that direction, but I would urge us to go even farther. I mean, this is obviously just my opinion, but as a matter of signaling, that is the one thing that I do hear from folks is the affordability factor of getting back into Gopher sports. And obviously once, nothing addresses that like winning, of course, but to get people back on campus, to get people back in support. And then once that demand sort of allows us then to maybe expand a little bit, I just, would really love to see that enthusiasm across the board. And we're doing really well in certain places. We have some sports that are on the verge of revenue sports that hadn't been in the past. But thank you for the work that you've done, and let's keep going. That would be my request. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, Director Coyle, I heard NRNR relationships with athletic graduates and then access. Maybe you, as a team, can comment on those?
Yeah, Chair Powell and Regent Rocha, thank you for the question. I'll just let Rhonda answer the question about NRNR in comparison and so forth, and I'll address the later some questions.
So, Chair Powell, Regent Rocha, there are a number of institutions that do set up systems to charge only in-state tuition, regardless of whether a student athlete is from out of state or not. All scholarships will be charged at the in-state tuition rate. There are others that have a formula that they receive subsidy basically from the university to offset some of the NR increases. So I'd be glad to look into those and provide those to you if you're interested.
Thank you.
Chair Powell and Regent Rocha, with respect to the M Club, I appreciate the question, your comments about the M Club. We have former Gopher great Quincy Lewis is now the director of the M Club, and Peyton Nolans, who is our senior associate athletic director, who Quincy reports up to, I think have done a very, very good job the last 12 to 16 months on trying to focus on those relationships. I could not agree more with your comments. I think we need to do a better job of making sure once a student athlete graduates from our institution that we make sure he or she always feels a part of our program. That we talk constantly to our current student athletes that there's people who were here before that laid the foundation, so we have these wonderful facilities and we have these wonderful opportunities. So we've tried to be very intentional with our M Club. I think you'll continue to see more improvement in that area around game day events and so forth. So we will be very cognizant of those, and I do appreciate those comments. And then with respect to marketing, obviously we're very grateful for the support of you and your colleagues. We were able to bring forward some initiatives over the past few months that we think will impact the fan experience. If you recall, when I was hired 3 years ago, one of the first things I did was put together a fan advisory committee where we have people who apply to be on this committee, and we select a handful of people to be a part of this group, and they give us great insight and input, and we'll continue to take those comments. Right or wrong, I say this all the time publicly, we don't have all the answers. We need feedback from our fans. We need feedback from the public. We truly want to make sure we provide a great experience for fans when they come to our game. And I think that's why you've seen some of the initiatives we've done, and we'll continue to be aggressive in those initiatives to make sure we attract people, because clearly when our venues are full, there's a certain vibe and a certain excitement that we can all appreciate. And again, we'll continue to focus on that as we move forward.
All right, Regent Swigum.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mark, my compliments to your student athletes too and their performance. You have a great story to tell. My question gets to the budget that you have, and on the revenue side, the Big Ten media, significant amount of dollars. And I've heard that it's going to be going down a little bit. Am I correct in that? And what type of hole is it going to cause us?
Chair McMillan and Regent Swigum, with the Big Ten, I believe we're going into year 3 of a 6-year agreement, new television agreement, and those revenues have been consistent. When we talk about, going back to Regent Shu's question, when we talk about debt service and some of those things, Rhonda, myself, Joy, our leadership team are very cognizant of what could happen if things change down the road. And that's why we're trying to make sure that we run a very efficient program. We take great pride in the fact that we academically have high success, and athletically we have high success, but we have the 8th highest budget in the Big Ten. That puts a lot of pressure on us to make sure we continue to be efficient as we can. But we'll continue to be mindful of those Big Ten revenues because it is a big part of our budget. When Commissioner Warren takes over for Commissioner Delaney, I believe at the end of December, those will be big conversations that we'll have. Obviously, President Gable will be a part of those conversations. But please know we're very mindful that we pay attention to that. But the revenues have been very consistent. We see them staying that way. We're just not sure they'll have the tremendous spike that they had in the past.
Okay.
All right, Regent Mayron.
Yes, thank you. I have a comment and then I have a question. So the comment is, I was stunned and thrilled when I had an opportunity to meet with you, Director Coyle, and then hearing the statistics again about how the university, our student athletes are doing academically and in terms of their performance as students athletes. I had no idea as a member of the public that the GPA was so high. In fact, I think you told me, if I'm wrong, correct me, that we were within the top 10 or the top 4 in terms of student athletes GPA across the country. Is that correct, Director Coyle?
Chair McMillan and Regent Mayron, it's with our APR, with respect to APR benchmarks, we're one of the top public schools in the country with respect to that measurement, yes. So not grade point average, but APR scores.
Okay, APR. So I was thrilled to hear that and to see our successes in the athletic realm is, I think, stunning. And I'm so glad that you're reporting this, and I hope that the press and everyone picks up on this because it is such positive news on both the academic side and the athletic side. I'm also looking at the revenue numbers. I mean, this chart, if anything, what it shows is this is a self-sustaining operation that receives virtually nothing from the university, doesn't come out of the revenues of the university or the legislature. Basically, the athletic endeavor is self-sustaining. Am I correct in taking that away from the information that you've provided to us? Through the NCAA fees, ticket sales, donations, et cetera.
Chair McMillan and Regent Mayor, and I'll let Ron answer that question, explain how our budget is set up from that.
Okay.
Chair Powell, Regent Mayron. You can say in large part, we are self-sustaining. There's a portion of the budget, as you can see, the O&M.
Yes, a very small portion of it.
Correct. That is funds that we receive from the university. We use those initially to pay the cost pool charges. So in our world, it's just about a wash. The money comes in, the money goes back. So I think you're correct in that basically we are self-sustaining.
Okay. And so I think that this program needs to be commended for its success in that as well. That I had, again, and coming into this, no idea that the money from the university or from the legislature, in fact, played so little role in our athletics and the success of our athletics. My question has to do with the coaching that you talked about with respect on the issue of mental health, and I understand we're going to be giving training down as far as coaches. Will that training also include the student athletes themselves in order to recognize that they may have a mental health issue or a problem that they need to bring to attention to, if not their coach, then to the outside medical director? In other words, for them to be able to recognize that they may have an issue. It's not just their coaches or others who work with them recognizing they have an issue. It's for them to recognize that they may need some help.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes, so thank you, Chair Powell, Regent Mayron, for the question. So yes, short answer. So the NCAA has recently passed some legislation in which it kind of outlines how mental health resources need to be communicated to coaches, staff, as well as student athletes and graduating student athletes, because that's a really big piece. So right now, our student athletes, and we see a little over between 30 and 40% of our student athletes currently are in our sports psychology services. So we sit a little bit higher than campus. I think campus numbers that I had most recently seen sit at right about 30%. So we're a little bit higher than that. And part of our education is our sports psychologists at the beginning of every season are part of our introductory meetings with our coaching staff. So they come in with athletic medicine, with our athletic performance group, and so they just kind of put a face to things. Additionally, we get in front of our SAC, which are Student Athlete Advisory Committee, both with sports psychology, and then I always also go in front of them at least once a year to just talk through what those services are. So I feel what we have seen is our student athletes are very aware. Some of the things that I think anyone on campus could agree with is we are seeing students coming to campus with much more mental health needs than we've ever seen before. And so a part of this is not only helping the coaches recognize, like you said, but then also where we're really seeing the education for the student athletes being beneficial is they're recognizing it in their own teammates, and then they're comfortable coming forward. So that's where we're really seeing some of these referrals, is a student athlete will come forward and say, I think my teammate is struggling, here's some of the things I've seen, I don't know how to help them.
Is a follow-up question. So as part of the training or the education that you provide to the student athletes to be able to recognize what might be symptoms of mental health issues either in themselves or in their teammates? Because people don't even know they don't even know the questions to ask because they aren't knowledgeable about that there's an issue within themselves or somebody else. And this goes to the earlier it can get picked up, the earlier it can be addressed.
So while we don't have a formal education program right now for our student athletes, it's, again, one of those things that we've been working towards. Where we kind of lay the information is when things don't feel right. Whatever that may be, if things don't feel right, things feel off. It may be as simple as sleep, right? So we talk quite a bit about sleep, but sleep hygiene and depression, even though sleep aberrant patterns are both a symptom are obviously very, very separate. So we want to be really careful that we don't have any self-diagnosing going on as well. So that's why we try to keep it a little bit more at the 30,000 foot level, where when things feel off, it's time for you to talk to someone, or when things are off with your roommate, it's time for you to come to us.
All right, thank you, Ms. Thomas. So we're running a little behind, so we've got two more questions, and let's be as concise as we can. Regent Kenyatta.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Presenters, my question was actually what Regent Mayeron asked about the O&M, and that was already answered. So I'll just quickly take the opportunity to thank you and to congratulate the student athletes through you. I guess those are high achievements, and being a student athlete, I wasn't, but I was friends with them, and it's a full-time job. So to be able to achieve that is tremendous. I had a friend who ran a track meet on the morning of graduation. So that just shows the work they have to do. But so thank you.
Thank you, Regent Kenyatta. Regent Anderson.
I'll be brief also. Interesting for me to hear Regent Beeson talk about the Big Ten, and potentially I would be all aboard for us having a priority of children's health or a healthy Minnesota. I actually think it could do some good in marketing. We're not professional athletes, we're amateur athletes, where the women are treated just like the men. That's through Title IX, and it's the way it should be. I think there's actually a position in the marketing world for that, and I think it's a great cause. I think back to, I was one of these rural Minnesota kids that grew up dreaming about being a Gopher athlete, and the Lord had other priorities for me. It didn't work out that way, but I also spent time at the University Hospital, and what a thrill it would have been if Gopher athletes would have came over there to see me. They never did, but I know Coach Fleck does that, and that's tremendous. And then I just want to talk about NR&R and in-state just very briefly. One of the things you have to realize, I would love to have also some equalization so the athletic department could save some money, but we also have to be adherent to the university budgets. Most Minnesotans don't understand that when we give a scholarship to a student here, if that student's in the College of Liberal Arts or the Carlson School or whatever, that money then goes eventually to those schools to pay the education. So we got to be careful about shorting those schools on their budgets also. But I have had individual coaches, and if you remember Lou Holtz in the 80s, and this really pertains especially to the Olympic sports, the non-revenue sports. Lou Holtz said, and it should be for a land-grant institution, we're going to get the heart and soul of our kids from Minnesota. We're going to have to go other places to find the arms and legs at times. And some of the Olympic sports have mentioned to me, the coaches, that with an R&R tuition going up, it is harder and harder to get those arms and legs because they give portion scholarships, but the portion the family has to pay ends up being more because it's went up. So there's not an easy answer to that, but I'd be willing to do something. The one thing I do see, and I think it was Regent Rocha maybe, or maybe Regent Hsu, we approved Athletes Village when we had approximately 90 million of the 180 million raised. And the theory was, and you guys have done a good job, I just heard a comment a few minutes ago from you, we're at about 135 million raised now. So the debt service is going down. But it appears that debt service going down, which we counted on, was going to be used for programming, and today it's used to pay the increased NR&R. The numbers are almost identical, what that's going. So it would be nice if we had a way to I don't know if you found a question. Just a lot of comments. Happy with the way the athletic department's going, but that's just kind of some of the things I see, and I think I agree with Regent Beeson on an initiative for children's health through the athletics would be fabulous.
Thank you, Regent Anderson.
Chair Powell, Regent Anderson, thank you for your comments. And I just returned from Idaho for 10 days, so I apologize for calling you Chair McMillan.
It's okay. I told he's been promoted.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks all for all the questions. That concludes a very robust discussion, and thanks to all of you for the continued, very positive direction of intercollegiate athletics here at the University of Minnesota. I think we're all very pleased with the leadership and the direction it's going in across a variety of dimensions. So appreciate your report. Thank you. All right, we'll turn now to the NCAA compliance overview. This overview will be presented by Jeremiah Carter, who is our Director of Athletic Compliance. Director Carter, Mr. Carter, welcome, and we look forward to your overview.
Thank you. Chair Powell, members of the board, good morning. I thought that it was important to first review our structure a little bit, because our structure is actually central to how we go about doing our job. So back in the early 2000s, the Office of Athletic Compliance moved from being athletic department employees to Office of the General Counsel employees. As you can imagine, as an oversight group responsible for ensuring that we're meeting all the requirements of NCAA rules, that can be challenging to do if the individuals that you're holding accountable are responsible for doing your performance reviews and do hiring and firing. At the time that occurred in the early 2000s, we were just about the only institution in all of Division I and pretty much across the country to have that set up. It's been very successful for us. You now see that it is an institutional governance standard within the Big Ten. However, I will point out that in most of those cases, it's a dotted reporting line out of athletics, as opposed to the Office of Athletic Compliance actually being employees of a different campus unit. So in total, there are 7 in our office who are responsible for the day-to-day compliance efforts. Several of my staff members have joined me today. They work incredibly hard and take very seriously the role of protecting the integrity of the University of Minnesota. Winning is great. Having a winning record for all of our teams is fantastic. But winning without integrity will not last. So it's our job to ensure that those wins come with integrity. I do have a dotted reporting line to Mark Coyle. That is essentially me keeping Athletic Director Coyle up to date on what's going on within the department and asking for support and help when necessary. So NCAA rules require that, it's written right into the NCAA Constitution, that we have institutional control over the athletic department. What that boils down to is the university's president or chancellor is ultimately responsible for all aspects of the athletic program, and ultimately responsible for ensuring that we are following NCAA rules. I tell people that our job is easy. We have 25 teams, 675 student athletes. If you include part-time and volunteer employees, it's about 900 people in the athletic department. There are 4,160 approximately NCAA rules. There are an additional 300 Big Ten rules, and we just have to make sure that all of those teams and all of those people are following all of those rules all of the time. No problem, right? So we do that kind of through 3 avenues. We educate, we investigate, and we report. So education is really the cornerstone of what we do. We do our best to provide kind of just-in-time education for our coaches, our student athletes, and various outside constituency groups. So essentially, nobody's going to remember all of the rules that they need to know all of the time, but it helps to get educational reminders when an item is coming up. So in the fall, when it's a heavy recruiting period for us, we go over lots of recruiting education with our coaches. When it is going to be the Super Bowl or March Madness, we send out lots of reminders about sports wagering, NCAA restrictions on sports wagering to our student athletes and our staff members. We also go outside of athletics. We go to various groups on campus and educate, and we do local businesses and folks like that. Investigate, a lot of things kind of fall under the heading of investigation. The majority of what that is audits and monitoring. We do a lot of, we trust that our coaches and student athletes are doing the right thing, but we're going to verify that they're doing the right thing as well. And the way that we do that is through our audits and monitoring system. Any potential NCAA rules or Big Ten rules violation that comes up, we are going to fully investigate it. So we're going to fully review that issue using all of the resources available to us. Those come in a number of different ways. We get self-reports from coaches. We spend time on social media looking at items, news reports. We get occasional anonymous reports through the university's U-Report system. And then occasionally we get calls from other institutions, the NCAA or the Big Ten, with items that we follow up on. Ultimately, the last portion of this, which we spend very proportionally little time doing, but it's probably the most important thing that we do, is report. So when we do find an NCAA rules violation, we don't just say, hey, we'll get it better, we'll get right the next time and move on. We report it to the NCAA or the Big Ten. That's required under NCAA rules, and we take that very seriously. So under the kind of education heading, so during the last academic year, we had 2,827 what we call individual educational opportunities, right? So that's one person getting one bit of education directly from our staff. That can come through letters to local businesses that we send out. We have a Twitter account that doesn't include the number of Twitter followers we have, but we put out lots of education there because we find student athletes and coaches spend a fair amount of time on there, and when we can convince them to add us to their queue, they get education through that way. We also do some proactive outreach, and then also do athletic department newsletters and various internal educational efforts. We also do educational meetings. So starting with the beginning of Athletic Director Coyle's tenure, the coaching, education, compliance sessions, monthly sessions, have been required. They were strongly encouraged prior to that, but they are now required. We turn that into a year-long competition for our coaches. Our coaches are very competitive. So when we turned it into our compliance presentations into a competition where they're answering questions, we've seen, I had a coach this year text me from Big Ten championships asking what the next topic was going to be because he had his Big Ten manual with him and he wanted to study. Whether or not he did that, I don't know, but he did pretty well on the next quiz. We also work with our Student Athlete Advisory Committee. We have 2 representatives from every team that come to these monthly meetings, and we provide them, again, kind of that just-in-time education that is going to be relevant to them at that time. So under the investigation heading, we do work both, we audit ourselves, and we also work with some outside within the university group. So we work with the provost's office to do an academic audit every year. We do a deep dive into one sport, looking at grades, course enrollment over a 5-year period in that sport to see whether or not there are really any red flags that we need to look into. This past year, it was the wrestling program. And then the Office of Internal Audit conducts a yearly sport audit that's a deep dive into that individual sport. This year it's football. That audit, honestly, is as much an audit of our office as it is that sport, ensuring that we have all the T's crossed and I's dotted on the forms that we need from those student athletes, and that we're doing our best to protect the university. Our internal audits, we do quarterly financial aid audits to make sure we're paying out the right amounts. We audit practice logs and recruiting logs. The last thing that we do here is a lot of in-person monitoring. So a lot of NCAA rules are centered around who can coach, who can work with our student athletes, and the limit on that. It also limits the number of hours that a student athlete can participate in their sport in a given day or a given week. We found the best way to do that is in person. Last year we were at 212 different Gopher events. So whether that was practice, a lot of competitions, we went to one for every sport. We did all of football, both home and away. There's a lot more to monitor with a football team. And then we also did select home and away competitions for men's and women's basketball. So the principle of self-reporting to the NCAA, my predecessors have done an amazing job of building the University of Minnesota's reputation with the NCAA. Having been an NCAA staff member, I can tell you that the enforcement staff at the NCAA respects the work that our office does. And we seek to maintain that through diligent reviews and then reporting any and all information that we receive as part of that. Some of our other responsibilities, we do waivers of NCAA and Big Ten rules. So sometimes, one of those 4,160 rules doesn't just fit the situation that we have, and we would like to ask the NCAA for an exception. That can be anywhere from transfer rules to academic rules to medical hardships for a student athlete. We also review new legislation. So last year, there were 123 proposed rule changes within NCAA rules. It's our responsibility to understand those, communicate them to our coaches, gather feedback, and then work with the athletic department and the president's office to determine how the University of Minnesota is going to come out on those proposed rule changes. And then finally, we've got we spend a lot of time with high school recruit reviews. So in addition to being admitted to the University of Minnesota, a high school prospective student athlete to be eligible for financial aid and to compete as a freshman needs to meet NCAA minimum standards. That involves our staff reviewing high school transcripts and giving our coaches a good read on whether or not that individual is going to be eligible so that they know that they're putting their recruiting efforts into the right places. We do about 500 of these per year, and they all start are mostly in August, September, and October. So we've got plenty of work coming up. So with that, I get to add all of you to my list of individuals educated, because there is actually some NCAA rules that are specific to being a regent for an NCAA member institution. So the first thing to know is that a prospective student athlete is an NCAA term that defines somebody who has started classes for the 9th grade. Whether they're good at a sport, whether they participate in a sport, doesn't matter. It's that they have started classes for the NCAA for the 9th grade. That's how the NCAA defines them. Once they become a recruited prospective student athlete, meaning our coaches have engaged them in some way to try and convince them to come to the University of Minnesota or to evaluate their talent, we have to start treating them a little bit differently than we do from the general public to ensure that we're not gaining any type of recruiting advantage. So within that, a couple of things to note. A recruited prospective student athlete would not be permitted in the suite area for either the Regents President Suite or any other suite area unless they're an immediate family member of a regent or of the president's office. You can always go through the board office, the office of the general counsel, or certainly the athletic department to check with our office to see whether or not an individual is a recruited prospective student athlete. We have a database that contains all of them. It's a very quick check. Also, NCAA rules prohibit regents from participating in the recruitment of prospective student athlete, regardless of whether or not a coaching staff member has asked you to engage in that recruiting. If a coaching staff does ask you to engage, please let me know. I'm happy to follow up with them. But even on your own, I know you all come from a home base where obviously you would be very proud to have an individual join a University of Minnesota team, but know that you can't recruit on behalf of the University of Minnesota because of your role as a regent. If you think you have a pre-existing relationship with an individual who falls into this category, again, feel free to run it through our office and we can look into that pre-existing relationship. So with current student athletes, the thing to know is that NCAA rules restrict any special benefit or discount, any sort of benefit going to a student athlete that's not expressly authorized by NCAA rules. The athletic department, as you can see from that budget, provides as many benefits as they can permissibly under NCAA rules. And it's important to know that, if let's say you bump into the parent of a current student athlete, out on a road trip or something of that nature, we can't actually provide any benefits to them that aren't expressly authorized under NCAA rules. So providing them a meal, giving them transportation, bringing them up to the a road game suite, those types of things would be impermissible under NCAA rules. So again, any questions that ever come up with that, please feel free to check with us. With that, I'd like to conclude with one comment that our job would be incalculably more difficult without the support of the athletic department. We believe that we have a good working relationship with both the administration and, more importantly, with the coaching staff. If you don't have coaching staff buy-in, you are not going to be able to build a good culture of compliance. We have found that with our current group of coaches and our administration, and I do want to thank them for all of their assistance in building our culture of compliance. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Carter, for a very complete report. And I know there are some questions. We'll begin with Regent Beason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, I'll note that Mr. Carter is from St. Paul. I believe Highland Park.
St. Paul Central.
Oh, St. Paul Central. But played football. He played football here at the university under Coach Mason. So we'll talk about that in a second in terms of how the world's changed, and it has. But I appreciate now the board does the clarity and the nuances of the duties and responsibilities that you deal with. I think we're well laid out, and it's helpful for me, and it's important for all of us to hear about that. So going back to your plan, this has to be a completely different world of football compliance than when you had started. In some ways, one could say, well, this has been de-risked completely because of the policies and procedures. But on the other hand, you're living in the world of the risk that you don't know about. And that's the greatest risk, is the one that's emerging. One of the things that strikes me, and maybe it's this Varsity Blues comment, but where risk is, it feels like it's shifted from players to, I'm not talking about here, but in general, to assistant coaches. The pressure assistant coaches or minor coaches are under, they have short honeymoons, they're moving families all over the country, there's big money in front of them. Feels like that has got a lot of risk. Those people, everybody's got pressure around here at athletics, I get that, but it feels like that's, and what that means for their mental health and what that means for compromising. So in terms of coaches, what can you speak about that?
Mr. Carter.
Chair Powell, Regent Beason, you're right. From the time that I started playing football here over 20 years ago, the landscape is very different. Our weight room was in a basement. Not the tons of natural light and beautiful places. And what comes with that, I think you're correct, is the pressure to succeed. But the tone for compliance has to be set at the top. We can do as much follow-up as we want to, but coaches in real time need to be able to make appropriate decisions and need to know when they need to check with our office. Speaking specifically with football, there is not a staff that we get more questions from within athletics. That has been a shift for us. Andrew Nelson on my staff directly oversees football. The number, if you go back through his phone logs, the number of phone calls that are with the football staff has to be close to 75%. It's evenings, weekends, always building that ask first culture, which we have, means answering a lot of questions. But there's no doubt that there is pressure to succeed, and we just have to be able to, trust and verify that we're doing the right thing.
Thank you. Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Powell, Chair Powell, and Mr. Carter. I appreciate the work you're doing. I think the fact that we have a different structure actually helps you do your job, being under the, not under the athletic department, but under the general counsel's office. Well, I did ask about the Varsity Blues question, which I would like to get your take on. But also with respect to the non-NCAA type rules, because our athletes have a student code of conduct that is imposed on them by the university, which may or may not include NCAA, but it does include training on, sexual assault, sexual harassment, all that type of stuff. I'm wondering, does that come up through your department, or is someone else responsible for those types of rules?
Chair Powell, Regent Shu. So we are fully just in the realm of NCAA, Big Ten, and WCHA rules. And really just the compliance-related rules. Thankfully, we don't have to measure to make sure that the court is the right length. But we also ultimately have, there are other offices within athletics that are responsible for educating on student code of conduct and things of that nature, but then also kind of working with those offices on campus to ensure they remain in compliance with university policies.
Okay, thank you. And then, thank you, Chair, regarding the varsity blues thing, if you could, and I understand that our system is much tighter than some of these other schools who are involved in terms of whether or not a student can get special credit or dispensation for their athletic ability or even musical abilities, other talents. And I was just kind of wondering how that works through your office in terms of our admissions process and whether or not we could ever have anything that is being currently investigated by the FBI.
Chair Powell, Regent Shu. So we are involved in the admissions process to the extent that we're kind of the first step. So once a coach indicates that they are interested in recruiting a prospective student athlete, the first stop is our shop. We put together kind of their academic credentials and then start involving other departments. From a structural standpoint, there are a lot of layers that a prospective student athlete has to go through in order to kind of be the academic and athletic requirements to be admitted to the University of Minnesota. From our office, it goes to JT Brewitt and the Lindahl Academic Center staff to determine what level of support that individual would need, where they kind of shake out on a, they're in the best position to determine how that individual is set up to do academically. If there is, prior to this coming out, there's always been a concern within athletics of the special admissions process and to ensure that it's not falling kind of outside of the normal university admissions process too much, because again, they're competing against, the students in the classroom. They need to be able to do that. So, NCAA rules kind of already touch on it a little bit, but certainly everything that has come out with the varsity blues scandal has been eye-opening, the way some of those things have come out, and it gives us an opportunity to look at what we're doing and make sure that we've tightened up what we do.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quickly, thank you for the presentation. You provide a sense of comfort that we're doing things right. I think the record, having read the materials provided, the violations that we have faced have been managed well and are of a variety that would reflect that we're doing well. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I'm going to ask a question maybe in the form of a bit of trivia. And possibly the answer is there isn't anything of this variety. But in your processes, and you talked a little bit about the source of potential violations or of how you become aware of potential violations. In the process, do you ever become aware of potential violations at other institutions? And if you do become aware of something of that, how do we handle that within, I think, a fairly delicate relationship between our institution, that institution, and NCAA and obligations on our part to disclose violations potentially by third parties?
Mr. Carter. Chair Powell, Regent Rocha. If you ask our coaches, we're the only ones following the rules. So it gets brought to our attention Plenty of times. And also just in our, we review social media for our own sense of being able to make sure that we're following the rules. But the number of things we see posted from other institutions or various that are like, hey, you can't do that. We are very careful to work with our coaching staff to ensure that they are comfortable with us going to another institution. So it's kind of, it falls down one of two tracks. A coach says, hey, I see so-and-so is doing this and I want to do that. And if we say no, then the response that we give them is, unfortunately, we can't do it this way. Would you like us to reach out to that institution to see how it is that they feel that they are able to do this? Those produce some interesting conversations. The other track is a coach just saying, look, I know you told me I can't do this. I know this school is doing this, and what can we do about it? And in those cases, it's kind of either we can reach out to those institutions directly, to their compliance staff, which those phone calls happen all the time, if the coach is comfortable with that. Sometimes the coach does not want another institution to know that that we're looking at them that closely, or they don't want that source to know. So in those cases, we can work with our conference office or report it to the NCAA enforcement staff.
Thank you. Thank you. Regent Simonson, we'll wrap this up.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Thank you for your presentation. Personally, being involved in a regulated industry, I know how important compliance is, and so I really appreciate what you're doing. Director Coyle just presented a budget of $123 million plus on that. And with regards to compliance, income, expenses, so on and so forth, your office, as I understand it, works with the internal audit committee office here, or do you do anything independent of that? And how often is it done?
Chair Powell, Regent Simonson, just so I'm understanding your question, you're asking where does our budget come from? Or
No, I know where it's coming from, but
Sure.
how do you audit how it's used? Income and expenses, compliance with regards to that.
Gotcha. So the athletic department budget is broadly audited by the Office of Internal Audit. However, we do review recruiting expenses. So our office, through the new online system, we review anything that a coach submits that is that they tag as a recruiting expense. So we look at receipts, we look at justification, we look at where the coach was traveling when, to make sure that the funds that they've expended for a recruiting purpose are appropriate. Regarding other areas, we have other ways of kind of ensuring that what is being spent is appropriate. Just as an example, student athlete awards, end of season awards are tightly regulated by the NCAA and the amount that can be spent. And in those, we collect from all of our sports that the end of year awards, the value of each of those awards, and then on occasion we'll double check that against the business office expense of that amount.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you, Mr. Carter. Very good report. Appreciate it. Thank you. So we have a few more items to review on the agenda. First, the report of the committees, and I'll just note that committees didn't meet this month, so there are no reports. That brings us to old business. Is there any old business to come before the board today? Okay, hearing none. Is there any new business to come before the board? Okay. Then, hearing that there is no new business, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. The motion is approved, and this meeting is adjourned. So you have to be careful.